I don't know if I finished this chapter, but sometimes these talks overlap and I repeat myself a little bit, but that's all right. I'll start reading from page 126. We're reading from Sri Guru and His Grace if you just joined us. So the subtitle here is The Real Test of Devotion. And Srila Sridhar says, and you may find this relevant in your travels and pilgrimages to India. Srila Sridhar says, I noted when we were preaching in South India that whenever any gentleman who was a renowned devotee in a particular place approached our Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he used to ask such men, under whose guidance does your devotional service to Krishna go on? Generally, they used to say, no, no, I'm directly concerned with Lord Krishna and Lord Rama. Then, when they went away, we heard our Guru Maharaj say, he has no devotion. That person was dismissed as an imitation devotee. That is a vague kind of devotion. It has not taken any particular shape because he is ignoring the ashraya, the shelter-giving devotees in the positions surrounding the Lord. That is the great test of devotion. Otherwise, without taking shelter of a devotee, if one shows great devotion, what is his motive? Generally, they think we want liberation, not the service of Krishna. To earn liberation, we are accepting the devotion of Krishna. That is a lower form of worship, worldly worship, not real worship in the transcendental plane. That is not eternal, but temporary. Devotion to the Lord must not be subservient to any other aim of life. The desire for liberation is one criterion of an imitation devotee, and another criterion is the neglect of elevated devotees. When the Lord alone is being worshipped, that is also false. These two kinds of apparent devotional practices, which are generally seen in the world, may be dismissed. But the world does not get any news of all these things. So this is a very important point that Srila Sridhar Maharaj will emphasize again and again, that bhakti has a peculiar character, and that is that real bhakti recognizes divine love in other souls, in other Vaishnavas. And that's a particular part of our worship. And one who ignores that may be some kind of sadhu. We don't dismiss that entirely. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course, was very dismissive of this sort of so-called devotion. But Srila Sridhar, he's pointing out that the real goal of those who want a direct connection with God is liberation. Bhakti is really its own end. One wants divine love simply for the purpose of being able to develop divine love and continue with it. Bhakti is its own end. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, devotion to the Lord must not be subservient to any other aim of life. Well, while in India, one will notice, and not just India, it's also in the West, one will notice that uh, many so-called followers of Krishna consciousness will worship many other different gods. And they'll say, well, from this God we want this, and from that God we want that, and it's all okay. What do we get from Krishna? Well, he's going to free me from the cycle of repeated birth and death. So I'm going to worship him. But I need things, so I'll worship Ganesh for money and Shiva for power, Durga for a good harvest. But this is really a lower form of worship. It's worldly worship in the sense that I'm engaging with the world, and while I'm doing so, I want some sort of uh, insurance. I want some sort of help. So if there are 33,000 different gods, let me worship all of them. And this way, I won't be lacking, and I'll probably get liberation. But this is not the real bhakti. This is false. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj says these different practices uh, may be dismissed as inferior quality. We don't say that, we're not saying that it's entirely ineffective. We're saying that this is not the highest form of bhakti. He says the desire for liberation is one criterion of an imitation devotee. So if you want to know who is an imitation devotee, um, you will notice that they're interested in getting free from this material world. Uh, they're interested in moksha. And the other criterion, he says, is the neglect of elevated devotees. So you'll see also they they're not interested in and they don't respect elevated devotees. So what to do with such association? Well, that's up to you. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj is saying, generally speaking, that might be dismissed as superficial. So then there's a question from a devotee. He says, so the spiritual master is sometimes called the Ashraya Vigraha, the personality of whom one must take shelter. And it's kind of interesting how different devotees interact with Srila Sridhar Maharaj because it looks like they're trying to impress Srila Sridhar Maharaj by showing, yes, I know the philosophy, I've heard this before, and using some words in Sanskrit like Ashraya Vigraha. So the spiritual master is sometimes called the Ashraya Vigraha, the personality of whom one must take shelter. Srila Sridhar Maharaj, yes. Just as in the beginning, one sees the forest from a distance, but in the end, he enters the inner circle of the forest. So from far off, Krishna alone appears to be the Ashraya, the giver of shelter. But when we approach Krishna more closely, we will find our shelter among his devotees. Our real shelter is found within his inner circle of servitors, not with Krishna directly. And this is a very important point. So we need to make peace with the other devotees. And we just said, well, if somebody's looking for liberation or if they're rude to the other devotees, we should avoid their association, or we can consider their worship as being superficial. But, and yet, it's not really our position to judge other devotees. And this is a strange dichotomy because how can I make progress if I don't deal with the really genuine devotees on the one hand? But you can't make progress if you're busy criticizing the devotees. And we will find in our particular experience, it will be probable that we cross paths with all different levels of Vaishnavas. And we're told, try not to be critical. Another interesting point is at different points in one's devotional career, one may have ups and downs. It's just like a marriage, if you like. There will be times in the marriage when everything goes perfectly, and one it's impossible to think of a better loving relationship. But then there will be days when the the two parties absolutely hate each other and can't get along. So in one's devotional career, there may be times when a particular devotee really is quite advanced, but there may be other times when that advancement recedes. Um, Sometimes we take two steps forward and one step back. Sometimes we take one step forward and two steps back. So my point is, it's difficult to gauge the advancement or superficiality of other devotees. And that should not be our primary point of view, but we have to try to look to ourselves and reform ourselves. Uh, so when we approach Krishna more closely, we will find our shelter among his devotees. And however advanced or retarded a particular devotee might be, we're recommended to involve ourselves in Sankirtan, which is congregational chanting. So you can see by the example of Madhusudan Maharaj and his friends, for example. Right now, they're all gathered together in Govardhan, in Vrindavan, and trying to forget whatever sectarian differences might arise based on trivial pursuits, but finding shelter among the devotees. So, Srila Sridhar points out, our real shelter is found within his inner circle of servitors, not with Krishna directly. We are of a vitiated nature. The word vitiated, it means spoiled, ruined. So he says, we're all ruined. Uh, I had a conversation with I've said this before. I had a conversation with Goswami Maharaj when I was invited to speak in Ukraine. And I said, who am I? How can I speak to these uh, devotees and people? And he told me, don't destroy yourself. You have something to give that. We're all flawed vessels. And I like that. Uh, None among us is so perfect that everything we say and do is divine. But we're trying. We're of a vitiated nature, but there are those who under no circumstances deviate from Krishna. They are the eternal paraphernalia of the Lord. They're not like us. And remember, the person who says he's vitiated, he's spoiled, he's not qualified. This is our Param Guru, His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami. He's the guru of Govinda Maharaj, so many others, who is the guru of so many others. They're not like us. They're eternally connected with Krishna. But we are sometimes coming and going away. We are unreliable servitors. That is our position. So we cannot claim the same position as the absolute servitors of the Lord. This is also, again, why it's difficult to really accept the followers of Jesus Christ as being great devotees. It may be said that Christ is a devotee of Krishna. I'm not 100% on that, but let's stipulate that Christ is a great devotee of Krishna. That's fine. But the Christians want to have a direct relationship with Christ. So you have to kind of question that. If somebody has a direct relationship, uh, what is that supposed to mean? There's so many others. It's just we cannot claim the same position as the absolute servitors of the Lord. Under their guidance, we can be given the chance of service. So we must accept that position. We are recruits. We are not amongst the permanent servitors of Krishna. And then again, we will hear devotees saying, well, you cannot have uh, a conditioned soul as your guru. Your guru must be Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated. If you accept a Nitya Buddha, conditioned soul, as your guru, then you're lost. And that's poison. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj is saying, he's saying, we are recruits. We are not amongst the permanent servitors of the Lord. Srila Sridhar Maharaj is not telling you, I am an eternally liberated soul, bow down. But we're recruits. We're not amongst the permanent servitors of Krishna. We must perform our service under a bona fide superior. So he's thinking, of course, of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. The new followers must be gradually accommodated under some bona fide permanent servitors in the land of Krishna. So it's a bit of a contradiction here, or a dichotomy, where we're supposed to be accommodated under some bona fide permanent servitors. But the real bona fide permanent servitors, they say, well, I'm a recruit, I'm vitiated, I'm not qualified. Next chapter, Lives of the Saints. Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, in his Chaitanya Shikshamritam, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained that there are two types of devotees in the stage of prema rurukshu, the beginning stages of pure divine love. These two kinds of devotees are classified as Viviktanandi and Goshjananandi. The Goshjananandis by nature love preaching. They live amongst the Vaishnavas, but there is another group, the Viviktanandi, who prefer a solitary position. There they chant the holy name of the Lord or think about the Lord's pastimes, Leela. These two groups have both been mentioned as being situated on a high platform of devotional service, just before the stage of pure love of Godhead. When they have completely attained the highest stage, there's no qualitative difference between one and the other. They're one and the same. Whatever work Krishna wants us to do through them, they will perform and surrender to him. Therefore, it cannot be said that one who does not have the preaching tendency is a lower Vaishnava. So then again, within our different sectarian groups of potential servitors, we find some are given towards preaching and some are quieter and more contemplative. And sometimes the preaching group will say, well, we're the best because we're doing evangelization and we're bringing others in. And wasn't that the real purpose of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? We have to save the fallen souls. Uh, and where the other group might argue, well, by going out into the world, you're becoming contaminated by all these different slings and arrows of Kali Yuga. And we don't want to go out and get contaminated by that. Even by going from a holy place to a big city, uh, you're getting contaminated by all the Maya. And what to speak of preaching in the West? But Srila Sridhar says here, it cannot be said that one who does not have the preaching tendency is a lower Vaishnava. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has clearly grouped these two sections of devotees in the stage of those who are just about to occupy the highest plane. There are two groups, one of a preaching type, another of a solitary type. But according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we cannot make the distinction that one is higher and the other is lower. So, of course, our book here and our discussion is about the position of the spiritual master, the guru. And devotees like to argue, my teacher is better than your teacher, or this teacher is better than that teacher. And we examine the teachers on the basis of how much preaching they do, how many temples they build, how many books they publish. Um, on the other hand, there's Haridas Thakur, who taught by his example, chanting millions and millions of names in a very humble position. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur tells us we should not make the distinction that one is higher and the other is lower. According to the desire of Krishna, they will do his will. The devotee whom Krishna wants to preach will do that work. But those who do not like to work in that way cannot be called unqualified. And again, um, sometimes we'll see that in a particular organization, uh, proselytizing is highly valued. The idea that we'll build another temple, include more people and make more followers. This is more highly prized. Um, but Srila Sridhar is speaking from a point of view which includes something like 70 years of practice in the Gaudiya Math, out of the Gaudiya Math, establishing his own Math, uh, living alone in a solitary place, and also preaching to the big time sannyasis who were preaching to millions and millions around the world. So he's seen both sides. And from a very deep well of experience, he's drawing these conclusions. The devotee whom Krishna wants to preach will do that work, but those who do not like to work in that way cannot be called unqualified. So again, we come back to this point that while we need to exercise a certain amount of criterion in terms of who we deem uh, a spiritual leader, at the same time, we should be careful about criticizing the faith of others because as we criticize the faith of others, that criticism will boomerang and it will come back to us and damage our own faith. So those that like preaching will naturally speak in favor of the preaching camp because they're inspired by Krishna to do that service. They're successful. Krishna says, Acharyam mam vijaniyam. It is my inspiration that can really deliver the fallen souls. Whomever Krishna will accept can understand him. Others cannot. Yam evaisha rinute tena labhyas. When Krishna delegates power sufficiently to a Vaishnava and wants to deliver many fallen souls through him, it takes place by his will. So a good example of that is Bhaktivedanta Swami, who we like to call Srila Prabhupada. His preaching in the West continues today. It may have fractured and fragmented into different varieties of Krishna consciousness or the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And some versions may be more successful than others. Some versions might cleave to a more fundamentalist point of view, and others, perhaps in India, move in the direction of a more traditional kind of Hinduism, but it takes place by his will. Swarup Damodar is not found to preach in any extensive way. So our mission is really founded on the work done by Swarup Damodar, the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is the crown jewel of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, is derived from notes taken by Swarup Damodar, and yet he's not a preacher. He was personal associate, secretary, assistant to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the golden avatar, but he wasn't really a preacher. Ramananda Roy is also not found to preach in an extensive way to make disciples. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ferrets out Ramananda Roy on the banks of the Godavari River because he hears this is a great devotee. And he more or less forces him to speak, where Ramananda Roy is reticent. He doesn't really want to come out so much as uh, a great sadhu. He's not found to preach in an extensive way to make disciples. There are no disciples of Ramananda Roy. Going door to door. On the other hand, Nityananda Prabhu and others did. Krishna selects his instruments according to his own desire. Kaviraj Goswami prays, Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. First, he offers his respect to the group of spiritual masters who are immediately in touch with the fallen souls. Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Then he says, Sri Rupa Sagrajata. He offers his respects to the Shastra Gurus. Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan did not practically come in touch with the masses for preaching, but they gave scriptures for the preachers. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj is drawing this distinction between the Bhajananandis and the Gosjananandis. He says, Kaviraj Goswami recognizes those who teach. Teaching is not easy. It's not for everybody. Uh, but the teachers need to teach. They need a text. They need a book that they can use in their teaching. And those who create those books are of a different order altogether. If you're constantly in touch with the unwashed masses, it may be your duty to tell them, we're not this body, we're eternal soul. But Atmagyan, that's not the essence of Krishna consciousness. We need to awaken some touch with Atmagyan first, perhaps, But then, once one is advanced enough to consider, excuse me, what is the nature of bhakti, one needs to consult Rupa and Sanatan, but they're not out there telling people, you're not this body. They're describing the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the ocean of devotion. Rupa and Sanatan did not practically come in touch with the masses for preaching, but they gave scriptures for the preachers. And here is the Sridhar, as he's commenting on the Vandeham verse, he's pointing out, well, Kaviraj Goswami, he gives credit to the preaching teachers, Sri Guru Vaishnavanguscha, but then he mentions in a separate breath, Rupa Sagrajatam, the six Goswamis. They're the Shastra gurus. The Shastras, the rules and regulations, and the ontological questions, all these things were given by Rupa and Sanatan. Are they not Uttama Adhikaris? So getting back to the question of the Nitya Buddha and the Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated versus conditioned souls, we consider that Rupa and Sanatana Goswami are eternally liberated. They must be Uttama Adhikaris. And yet, here they are um, sitting in a circle in Vrindavan somewhere discussing the the Shastras, the rules and regulations, the ontological questions. Anytime you come in connection with words, your absolute spiritual vision is becoming contaminated by language. Language is equivocal. Language is something that always is open to interpretation. That was Wittgenstein's point. He said, well, language cannot really arrive at any kind of truth. You can kind of touch on facts. You can say 2 plus 2 equals 4, and you can develop a 400-page thesis that uh, proves that axiom. But metaphysical questions involve language, and language is ambivalent and equivocal. So just by touching language and doing something as mundane as creating books which involve black marks of ink on paper or pinpoints on palm leaves, that's a mundane activity, isn't it? So how would an Uttama Adhikarya, how would an eternally liberated soul come down to the level of language? Srila Sridhar says, are they not Uttama Adhikaris? So you might argue that a real genuine, absolutely liberated soul will not have any kind of touch with this mundane world. They did not come in direct touch with the people, but as they were meant to by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they laid the foundation of the preaching of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So he's saying Rupa and Sanatan themselves, they didn't have multitudes of disciples like Narottam Das Thakur, but they laid the foundation. They are the Shastra gurus, the spiritual masters who give the revealed scriptures. And and we respect Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. We respect the preachers who preach, and we respect the thinkers who write. Hmm? Kaviraj Goswami first offers his respects to the recruiter gurus, then in a higher stage to the Shastra gurus, and then to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came with his associates and paraphernalia to inaugurate a new truth in the world. In 5 stages, He offers his respects to his spiritual masters, and in the highest stage, he offers his respect to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha and Govinda and all the gopis, headed by Lalita and Vishaka, Sri Radha Krishna Padam, Sahagana Lalita Vishakan Vitamscha. So the Shastra gurus are doing some work as they have been inspired by Sri Krishna. They're not coming in direct touch with the fallen souls. So we cannot say that because they're not directly preaching to the fallen souls, they're not sparshamani or touchstones. To say so would only be expressing our partiality to the preaching group. So he's saying here, we may express partiality to the preaching group because they're responsible for gathering new followers, uh, opening temples. But let's not neglect those who are responsible for the Shastras. They may have to sit alone in a quiet room and write with a pen. And then there are those who do support. Uh, Maybe their only support is uh, doing puja or attending a lecture. But all these different devotees are worshipable souls, and we should be careful about uh, criticizing them. So he moves on. He says, we have to put some faith in the spiritual master. We must have faith that what he does is the activity of the Supreme Lord working within him, that Krishna has come to preach about himself through our spiritual master. We must try to see Krishna in Guru and Guru's actions as meant to deliver us. We are encouraged in this way. Still, this is the relative view. So, in other words, everyone with a teacher has to see his teacher as giving uh, valuable spiritual advice, teachings. But then again, it's possible to do a universal evaluation of many different teachers and arrive at the fact that perhaps this one is deeper, this one is a better teacher, this one has a better temperament. Still, this is the relative view. From a very strict impartial vision, we can classify the guru according to his realization as an intermediate devotee, Madhyama Adhikari, or a topmost devotee, Uttama Adhikari. Amongst the servitors of Krishna, some are inclined towards Radharani, some towards Chandravali, and some are in the middle. Some devotees are more attracted to Braja Leela, some to Gaura Leela, and some are in the middle. This is the nature of the Lord's pastimes. These differences will exist eternally. So Srila Sri Ramarsh, he's a very deep thinker, apart from being an excellent spiritual master, but he's capable of demonstrating an infinite variety of gradation and understanding that different devotees come from different places. We don't all follow exactly the same path. It's said that all roads lead to Rome. So in the ancient uh, system of the Appian Way and the Roman highways, Madhusudana Maharaj would know about this, that extend from Italy to the Mediterranean and Egypt. Uh, any one of those roads would lead to Rome. Uh, and so we're all on our own particular path with our own particular worship and our own particular Guru Dev. Now there are so many. But the idea is eventually these paths connect and they lead to Rome. But your path is not my path, and my path is not your path. It doesn't always work like that. If I try to imitate someone, it won't always work. There was uh, a Vaishnava guru in California who liked to surf. And he found that while he was surfing, he could talk to the other surfers. And they would ask him, well, why are you uh, out here on the ocean? And then he would start talking about the Bhakti ocean and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the waves of mercy, so many metaphors connected with bhakti and divine love. And in this way, he would preach and make followers. And he was very successful. Later on, he established a temple, I think, in Vrindavan, became an important sannyasi. Uh, but you can't imitate that. You can't decide, all right, well, I'll get myself a surfboard and go out and surf the waves of divine joy and bring people to Krishna consciousness like that. We all have a different path. Recently, Siddhanti Maharaj, uh, his disappearance day was honored, and he was Chidananda. I knew him well. We were friends as far as the people in the ashram become friends. And he met he met Srila Prabhupada on Watsika Boulevard in Los Angeles one time when his car had broken down. And, sometimes people will criticize Bhaktivedanta Swami saying, well, he drove a Rolls Royce. How is that? It wasn't a Rolls Royce. It was an old used Mercedes Benz that was comparatively uh, luxurious, but it wasn't a great car. It was always breaking down. So he had a breakdown in the middle of the street close to where the devotees lived. And Chidananda was walking along. And he said, what seems to be the problem? And he had some knowledge as a mechanic and opened up the hood and adjusted the carburetor or some such apparatus. And Srila Prabhupada was very happy with that. And that was his introduction to Krishna consciousness. But it's doubtful that you can make a career as a mechanic and then use that as your platform to become Krishna conscious. So one might be a surfer, one might be a mechanic, but we have different paths. Uh, Continuing the reading, uh, it says, Gaur Lila higher than Krishna Lila. Some devotees have a preaching nature, whereas others may be of the secluded type, but that does not mean that all who are of the secluded nature are lower and all who are of the preaching nature are higher. We can't say that. They should be judged according to their surrender and acceptance of Krishna. Both Gaura Lila and Krishna Lila are the highest in Goloka. But if we're bold enough to assert that Gaura Lila is higher than Krishna Lila because of its magnanimous dealings, because it is distributing itself, then it should be given more importance. In that consideration, it is superior to Krishna Lila. And if we are to follow very strictly this point, then of course we may have to appreciate the preaching section of the Vaishnavas, considering that they're doing the most beneficial work in the universe, Loka Hitaya Cha. The preachers are more fortunate because through them, Krishna is trying to release many fallen souls. A relative form of vision may be seen in that way. Gaur Lila is higher than Krishna Lila. Why? Because it is more spacious and broad. It is available to everyone. And in Gaur Lila, Krishna is distributing himself to the fallen. This is something in addition to Krishna Lila. Then, whenever we find that good fortune has made someone an agent to raise up the fallen souls, we may have some greater appreciation for him, some justification for considering the preachers to be more fortunate may come if we consider that Krishna is better when preaching than when playing within his own group. Naturally, we will have preference for the preachers who have brought Krishna consciousness here among us. Krishna has chosen certain devotees as his agents to preach about him to the fallen souls, and that is more desirable for us in our present position. So, if we develop our perspective in that line, of course, we can say that fallen souls like us will give more stress to those who are the cause for our delivery. To think that some agents are preferable to others because the symptom of magnanimity is more easily traceable in them is a relative view in the ultimate context of reality. Although sometimes we may judge Vaishnavas according to their different activities, we're not always correct because the devotee is chosen for a particular service by the Lord. And whatever the Lord wants to do through him is done by his will. This is the underlying principle. It is his selection. Sometimes the selection comes to A, sometimes to B, and sometimes to C. We are all at the disposal of the Lord's infinite will. And according to his sweet will, according to how Krishna wants to utilize us, our activities will be successful. That is the absolute consideration. We cannot fail to connect success with the medium. There's also some value in that. But we must consider that Krishna is there in the background. We must also understand that the divine will, the highest will, is working through us. So we should not be extreme in judging a devotee according to external consideration. Well, powerful thoughts. I don't know who among us can live up to this, but I'm sitting in Mexico with my Darth Vader hip, a Darth Vader outfit. So I I don't know. That's all I can say for today. I think I covered about an hour, but it's an interesting consideration to make. Those who are busy within the mission constructing temples and so on will argue that their position is the best. Uh, those who are not may argue, well, I'm taking a safer position. I'm I'm retiring by the banks of the Ganges to worship my Tulsi plant and take my beads in hand and reckon with my own ego. One of the big problems with preaching then also is ego, because as soon as you get a certain number of followers uh, telling you that you're the best, it's very, very difficult to avoid having an ego. And you'll see that because also the people will come to the guru and they'll say, well, what about so and so Prabhu or so and so Maharaj? Shouldn't I listen to him? And any good teacher will say, well, no, don't listen to that person because you're not really ready. Or right now, I'm trying to have you make progress in this line, and that might deviate you. But sometimes you can't be subtle with followers. You have to tell them, no, not at all. Stay away from him. See? and that converts converts into a lot of ego. So that's all I can say for today. Pranashish wants to say something. I know him. No, he's happy. Pranashish is happy.
But
Yeah.
one thing, I remember, every now and then, especially around maybe a festival day, Srila Sridhar Maharaj would be happy if we went over to see Puri Maharaj, just to say hello and how's it going, and we're coming from Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And again, Puri Maharaj would be so happy to have word from Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And they would feed us, we would take our prasadam, and we would go back. And that was it. Like, just simple going there, saying, Srila Maharaj sent us to say, hello, he hopes you're well. And that was it. We never asked a question. We never intruded in any way. They gave us prasadam and we came back. And Guru Maharaj was happy to hear that we went to visit Guru Maharaj. So there was a very non-contractual, simple act of kindness from one pure devotee to another. No strings attached.
Yeah, Srila Maharaj was very generous in that, I think, in that regard, in that he didn't see himself as being the avatar of anything. He was happy if the devotees uh, connected with other great souls. He always, he really enjoyed the company of Yajavar Maharaj. Yajavar Maharaj would come over and visit him, and he would just be, uh, he would be very happy. I'm trying to think of metaphors, but you know,
Well,
yeah,
there's a wonderful story where Yajavar Maharaj was playing with Guru Maharaj's beard.
yeah. They,
Like, he
they
was
had a
right up
great time.
and he was playing with his beard and they were touching each other so affectionately. And these were
Yeah,
two
they were.
men in their 80s.
Yeah, Srila Sridhar was very grave, uh, but at the same time, he was a sweet human being, He always spoke highly of Madhava Maharaj, Keshava Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Yajavar Maharaj, Puri Maharaj, and not only those in his own, Varga or his godbrothers, but he was also affectionate with Sagar Maharaj, Goswami Maharaj, even Tirtha Maharaj, whoever came to visit him. He was especially affectionate with Govinda Maharaj. So uh, he was when he's asked, what is your consideration about these ontological points? He would do his best to show you both sides of something and try to go deeper. Aristotle, he said the mark of intelligence is that you can hold two opposite ideas in your mind for as long as possible before making a decision about one of them. Like quantum physics is like that, When is a particle, and when is a particle not a particle? That's something that you can consider and keep going. So Aristotle considered that a mark of intelligence. And you can see Srila Sridhar Maharaj's his intelligence is very, very deep, but I don't he tried to keep ISKCON. The ISKCON gurus would go to him and ask him questions. He was always trying to harmonize. He loved that expression. He said religion means proper adjustment or the ability to harmonize different ideas. And now Pranashish Prabhu is harmonizing the I Ching.
Symbolically.
Well,
I,
he has these
from
paintings that use sort of lines, and I pointed out to him that it's reminiscent of how the Chinese organize the sun, the moon, the mountain, the spirits, the rain, into these what they call hexagrams. And I saw he's doing some new work on that. Cool.
I wanted to say something about what the conversation. So last night I was just looking at a picture of somebody with a tilak, and I went, "Gosh, a tilak is just like a tuning fork."
It's like what?
A tuning fork.
Oh,
Do you
that's
know a
good.
tuning?
Yeah. I
Um,
yeah,
um,
I have one. No, and listen, I have a program on I have a little box that does that. But for
yeah.
years, I play guitar, so for years I would always carry a tuning fork in my pocket. And you're right, I never thought of that.
Peter,
That's
Well,
pretty
that's a
cool.
great
I think
observation.
that
That's
really,
that's
really harmonized again when you said the word harmonized.
oh,
I was
that's
thinking
really good.
the
I love it. Very
Yeah,
whole
poetic.
conversation. So we're all we've used the metaphor that we're all tuned in. We have we're like an orchestra. We all have our
Yeah,
different parts
that's
to
good. I
play,
like that. I don't
and
normally I don't normally wear tilak for two reasons. One, I can never get it straight. It always comes out crooked. And the other one is I get it all over my glasses and I just can't clean it out. So I feel awkward putting tilak. And we have a comment here we have a couple comments in the chat here. Uh, some people confuse I Ching with a religious book. This is Teresa Lorette Mola from Merida, Yucatan, Tapanandini. And she says this book helps people navigate material influences. Yeah, the I Ching is not, I don't think of it as being something religious, but yeah, it's kind of like a road map. The map is not the terrain, but it may give you some help. Like if you're trying to understand it's considered to be an oracle, but it's more than that. If you're trying to understand what is uh, a good path for me to take today, should I go uh, should I go preaching or should I stay at home and meditate? You can look at the I Ching. The I Ching will say, you know, the road that is taken is not the road that leads. And you go, wow, what does that mean? You have to think about it. It's an oracle. So uh, the Chinese divide it. The I Ching is very appropriate in a sense for the digital age because it's based on ones and zeros. It goes up to 64, but a line is a one and a broken line is a zero. So if you have three of those, that's two to the third power, and if you have six of those, it's two to the, I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. It goes up to 64. So if broken lines are yin, which is feminine energy, and straight lines are yang, which is masculine. So how the feminine and masculine energies combine and what they produce, this was contemplated by the Chinese a long time ago. And we're coming up on Chinese New Year, February 17th. And my first spiritual master was Chinese. I
wow.
told Pranashish the story. Well, when I was a boy of about 9 or 10 years old, I can't remember clearly. Uh, my father was working in Hollywood, but we didn't have a place to stay really. So he dropped me and my brothers off at a monastery for a summer. And we stayed there under the auspices of the Benedictine monks. And kind of writing my memoir right now. Uh, and I was thinking, well, the main monk over there was a man named Father Thaddeus Yang. And he was unassuming. He would dress in a torn uh, habit, with a hood. And the Benedictines have this idea that you should do some service, you should do some kind of work. And there's a long story behind them, but his thing was he would make ceramics and also do calligraphy with the I Ching. And I found him one day creating an enormous sculpture of a horse out of driftwood that he found in the Mojave Desert. And he would burn it black with a blowtorch. So here's this old Chinese dude with a Camel cigarette and a blowtorch uh, setting fire to a giant structure of a horse. And I would ask him, well, in the Bible it says the world was created in 7 days. How am I supposed to believe that? And he would say, well, it never says how long a day is. It never says, you know, maybe a day could be a day of Brahma, you know. I thought it was pretty cool. Or I would ask him, what about Adam and Eve? And he would say, well, it doesn't say there's only one Adam and one Eve. And he taught me the idea of a bit of flexibility and exegesis or hermeneutics or interpretation. And I later found out in Srila Sridhar Maharaj, even more so than Srila Prabhupada. He tells you, do this, don't do that. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, well, there's this dynamic between the Gosjananandi and the Bhajanandi. It's not so easy. So as I'm writing my memoirs, uh, I thought, let me look up see if that guy has the biography. He's not around anymore. He died in 1998. But I found his biography, and he was in China when he met the Benedictines. But one of the Benedictines told him, I'd like to give you a scholarship, and you can study French in Belgium. And he was like, yeah, but I'm a Buddhist. So this preacher, Father Lebbe was his name, he told him, don't you know that in Buddhism, there's a tradition of bhakti? And Father Yang said, well, yeah, that's true. They have this idea of Amitabha Buddha, also Avalokiteshvara, who is a realized Buddha, but he comes to earth to preach. And what does he preach? He preaches bhakti. And I just discovered this like 3 or 4 days ago. I'm like, what? You mean the guy? Yeah, the guy I met in the desert 50 years ago who was teaching me something about, God, he was into bhakti as a Catholic? Really? And I looked into it, and yeah, it's not bhakti as we understand it, of course, but there is a kind of tradition in Buddhism. It's called Pure Land. That might be useful for devotees who want to preach in China. So keep it in mind. And then Yang said he wasn't convinced. He wasn't really convinced by those arguments, but what convinced him was the dedication that this man showed. He was convinced by the personal example. And I often feel that way. I have a certain amount of faith, but much of my faith comes from Srila Sridhar Maharaj and his personal example, Srila Govinda Maharaj and his personal example, and also you all who are keeping this alive after so many years. Some of you were in the ashram for 5 minutes or 10 years or whatever it was, but your personal faith gives me faith and hope. Otherwise, I don't know how I would go on with this. But that was an interesting anecdote about the life of Father Yang. He was this crazy old Buddhist who decided to become a Catholic. And there he was in the desert with his blowtorch working on horses. He did calligraphy, and he knew about the I Ching, so that's how I know about it. But I Ching is interesting. It's not really a spiritual thing. It's more an analysis of the material forces. But, you know, any art is involved with both, I think. So good luck with your artwork there, Panashish. Tapanandini, thank you for joining us this morning. Hari Priya, I really like what you said about the tuning fork.
Yeah,
Does,
can I use that as well?
yeah, use it.
It's
Use it.
brilliant. I
The
can't believe it.
tuning
That's a
fork.
really deep
I
inspiration.
never thought of that. Yeah,
Never.
no.
This is what sitting around doing nothing does for your brain.
Oh,
Somehow,
that's a big one.
something.
That's a big one. That's really nice.
It
It
was
is.
nice because of the what my yogi was reading to us today. I felt it all brought it all together. That every devotee has a different role to play, but the truth
Yeah.
is that we're all harmonized in our devotional service. And
Yeah. I don't know.
um,
I don't know where I put my tuning fork. I usually used to keep it on hand all the time. I
oh,
like to have it in my pocket just because I felt like, okay, with this, I'm in tune. So that keeps you in tune. But maybe
yes,
I should put my TLAC. Another reason why I don't put the TLAC is because this is being recorded and I don't know who's watching me, you know, and I feel awkward. So if I'm in India, if I'm with Madhusudana Maharaj, I put my TLAC. So, all right, boys and girls, ladies and
Hey,
gentlemen,
thank you very much.
children of
Have a
all
lovely
Hare
ages,
day.
thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. Happy Chinese New Year.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So Vasily, can you hear me?